Contact E.F. Schumacher Society, 140 Jug End Road, Great Barrington, Massachusetts, 01230, United States of America. Or visit us online at www.smallisbeautiful.org. Thomas Greco is director of the Community Information Resource Center and author of Money, Understanding and Creating Alternatives to Legal Tender, New Money for Healthy Communities, and Money and Debt, a Solution to the Global Crisis.
The topic of this presentation is how to build healthy community economies. And I have a whole PowerPoint presentation that's addressed to that. I think I'll use that sort of as an adjunct rather than try to do the whole thing as a canned presentation. But I think I'd like to start out by getting, first of all, some of the burning questions that you might have that you came into the conference with or that might have been raised by this morning's presentation. So if anybody has anything they want to say, this is probably the time to say it. Yeah?
Yeah, just in general, as we go along, the factors that, I guess, reinforce local currencies positively instead of negatively. I mean, you know, what keeps them going, you know, once you've started them? How, a lot of them seem to peter out, it seems to be a matter of people aren't finding those transactions satisfactory. So what is it that makes, which makes it rewarding for people to use it?
Okay, that's a good question to start out with. The community currency efforts that have been put forth so far, and I've been personally involved in two of them in Tucson, Arizona. They typically start out with a burst of enthusiasm, a lot of volunteer labor pushing the thing forward, a lot of people rally around and join with the expectation of something good happening, and good things do happen, but it seems to, in most cases, reach a plateau and then a gradual decline. And I've seen that twice in Tucson, and I've seen it in other places as well. And this seems fairly typical. We try to keep the enthusiasm going with regular trading fairs and potluck dinners and gatherings, but I think the things that cause it to not continue to thrive is, number one, it's perceived as a fringe kind of movement. The mainstream has not gotten on board. Consequently, the amount of goods and services and the variety of goods and services that can be obtained within a LETS system or with a community currency is limited. And so people gradually lose their enthusiasm for it. Another aspect of that is it's not convenient. You know, I might have to go all the way across town to get my 2 loaves of organic vegetable, or two loaves of fresh baked bread, or my organic vegetables, and it's just not cost effective, it's not efficient, it's not convenient. So until we get a critical mass, and that's not just a matter of size, it's not just a matter of number of participants, but the scope of the goods and services that's available with the local currency or within the LETS system, it's not going to be able to sustain itself. And Tucson Traders right now is going through another crisis. Our membership has dropped off from a high of about 220 down to about 60 active members. And the core group is down to about 3 people who are just sort of keeping it going at this modest level. Now, we do have 12 or 15 businesses in the community that are willing to accept Tucson tokens, but typically, as a small percentage of the sales price of whatever they're selling, maybe 25, sometimes 50%. So those are the things that we're up against. So my efforts of late have been directed toward recruiting the mainstream business community and municipal governments to get involved in adopting local exchange alternatives. And that's what the PowerPoint presentation gets into. So let me start through this. If we talk about a community currency, first of all, we have to understand what a community is. And here's a definition that I borrowed from my friend Michael Linton. An effective community is a process, an ongoing collection of interactions and continuing relationships. So it's not just a one-off interaction. It's a continuing process. It's a continuing relationship with people that you expect to do business with continually over a period of time. So the defining characteristics of a community are economic and cultural self-sufficiency. And I draw a lot from Jane Jacobs, and we'll get to that in a minute. But, you know, people everywhere are thirsting for community. The social fabric has been basically disintegrated, and we can argue about what the root causes of that disintegration have been. But money and banking, I think, are fundamental in that. They've been corrosive to the social fabric, and they preempt community self-determination. As Michael says, money, government money can and does go anywhere. It comes into the community and goes right away out again. So healthy communities require healthy local economies. And as Jane Jacobs points out, the salient economic entities are not nations, they are cities. And so we have to focus on the economies of cities and city regions. The common problems that community economies have are that local producers are forced to compete with outside producers that are subsidized, enjoy political privileges, or are not required to play by the same rules. So you've got the mom and pop hardware stores and grocery stores competing with the big chains that are importing goods from China that are manufactured with slave labor or close to slave labor, and are operating in factories where environmental laws are non-existent or not enforced. So the companies producing those goods are able to externalize much of the cost of that product. So it's difficult to compete with products that are produced that cheaply because so much of the cost is externalized. Furthermore, the terms of trade are dictated by outside buyers or sellers who dominate markets. Now, many of the markets for global commodities are dominated by a few small players, or a few large players, like the markets for grains, for example. You've got basically Cargill, ADM, and maybe one or two smaller ones that basically control the movement of grains from the farmers to the global markets. So prices are manipulated. Likewise in petroleum, you've got a few large petroleum producers, and you've got the cartel, OPEC, that are able to determine production levels and prices. Also, money that comes in goes quickly out again. And resources and wealth are siphoned off by absentee owners. Now, we should dwell on these for a little bit because these are common problems common to every local economy. Give an example of the last one. The famous potato famine in Ireland during the mid-19th century. There was a blight that caused part of the potato crop to fail. But still, there was plenty that was produced. The problem is that it was being taken to England by absentee owners, leaving very little or nothing for the Irish themselves to eat. And this happens over and over again. We have absentee ownership taking wealth out of the region. In the Appalachian region, they often say, why is the land so rich and the people so poor? Well, it's because the coal mining companies are owned by outsiders who extract the wealth from the land, leave it scarred and depleted, and the people that live there have to contend with that devastation. So conventional money is problematic.
Can we ask questions in the middle, or should we wait till the end? Just regarding what you're saying.
I guess if you want to ask a question, you can, and I'll try to address it if it's not going to be too interruptive to the process.
I was just wondering, in the case of the people who ship the potatoes elsewhere, their motivating forces for doing that, is it just that they wanted the bigger money for them?
Well, it's profit.
They get bigger profits, so do that.
That's the nature of a corporate enterprise, is to increase its sales and increase its profits and maintain its market dominance. And it's just good business. You know, if you're a business manager, this is the culture that you're in. And the ironic thing is that business managers, as a human being, they have a certain set of values, but within the corporate culture, they have a different set of values, because the purpose of the corporation is, as I said, it is. So there is this dissonance that exists. And it's not that corporate managers are evil people, it's just that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing to do their job. Quite often they don't see the impact on other people. And I think that's why we all do things that are destructive, because we don't feel the impact that we're having on other people. So as I said this morning, money and banking have been politicized. Money exists mainly as bank credit that must be borrowed into circulation at interest, and the global monetary system has institutionalized usury, which creates the growth imperative that I pointed out earlier. Yes, yes. So you have a debt imperative. The debt grows with the passage of time. And in order to try to pay the debt, there is this futile attempt to grow the economy, to increase sales, to increase profits. So corporations are doing what they need to do to survive. Those that don't succeed in growing their sales and growing their profits and dominating their markets fail. So the debt imperative is caused by the system of money that we have, and the debt imperative causes this growth imperative. And this is what we have to get out of. So the effect is that money is kept artificially scarce, despite what David Boyle said. You know, in a sense what he says is true, but you've got to get into the details to sort it out. So money is artificially scarce, it's expensive, and it's misallocated. Now, the problem we have is, how do we insulate without isolating? How do we get a local economy that is not overwhelmed by the global economy? We want to reduce exploitation, we want to enhance the economic vitality, we want to enable self-determination and optimize the community's standard of living and quality of life. This is something that I came up with that seems appropriate. Economists are fond of saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. This causes them to promote this current wave of globalization. But the current wave of globalization is a tidal wave that sinks all but the biggest. So if we use the analogy of the safe harbor, this happens to be one in Hawaii. Basically, what do we have? We're not isolated from the open sea, but we're protected by a seawall, a barrier that protects the harbor and the small boats in it from the turbulence of the open sea. So we need to create something similar to that for local economies. So in an economic sense, what kinds of seawalls can we build that make the local economy a safe harbor? And I'm suggesting that money is one of the key elements. Now we saw that the specialization of labor means that we have to have a medium of exchange in order to acquire what we need. That's money. Those who control money control everything. Money is the bottleneck through which all economic exchange passes. And those who can control money can control every aspect of the economy. So with our centralized monetary system, we have a few people making the decisions that affect everybody. So there's a fundamental need for exchange mechanisms that enable all desirable trades. Now, even academic economists recognize that the current dominant monetary system is not enabling all desirable trades because of the scarcity that exists. We want mechanisms that reduce business costs, that favor local suppliers. Local needs should be met locally if possible, that enable community control over its own economy and its own quality of life. Mutual credit associations and community currencies provide exchange media that are abundant, interest-free, community-controlled, democratically allocated, self-adjusting, stable and sustainable. Now this is the case that we have to make to the mainstream. We have to show how this happens. I often say that my purpose is to liberate the exchange process. Liberate it from what? Liberate it from centralized monopoly control. There are two synergistic approaches. One is the creation of mutual credit clearing exchanges, and the other is complementary currencies. And as I pointed out, these are the two highest levels in the evolution of reciprocal exchange. Mutual credit is clearing, complementary currencies are private third-party IOUs.
Are they mutually exclusive?
No. They can be combined, and we'll see that in a minute. So to elaborate on mutual credit clearing exchange, it's an association of buyers and sellers that provides for direct settlement of bills due to one another, reducing or eliminating the need for money as an intermediate payment medium. It enables bills to be paid without the use of money. So how does it work? Ultimately, goods and services pay for other goods and services. You get points when you sell something. You spend points when you buy something. Now, it is possible to settle remaining balances at periodic intervals. And in the past, this has been done pretty commonly. You might have a clearing association where you carry open balances for a period of, let's say, a month. And then at the end of the month, you settle up using some other payment medium. So it's like the It's like the casino games. You get chips when you go in, you cash chips when you go out. Some people leave with more than they came in, and some vice versa. So you can have a settlement process that takes place periodically, monthly, annually, quarterly, or you can carry the balances indefinitely.
And the settlement process would be in,
Oh, you pay up in cash. So
you pay up in the national currency, basically.
that's typically the way it works. But you could pay up in some other agreeable medium. Now, LETS is a mutual credit clearing system. And a lot of people are familiar with how that operates. And here's the originator of LETS. LETS systems have proliferated in communities around the world. How many would you say there are now?
Oh, God, I don't know. I'd say a few hundred.
Few hundred.
Operating with any stability at all.
Okay. Well, there have been thousands. A lot of them have gone out of business.
They were never in business.
That's why they went out of business. So let's try to visualize now what a mainstream mutual credit system might look like. A group of businesses can organize into a mutual credit clearing association, which would allow them to engage in cashless trading among themselves. So if the smiley faces represent businesses in the community, they can all get into this circle and then start providing goods and services to one another and simply keeping a record of debits and credits that correspond to those transfers of real value. Now the payment options, they could be simply ledger records, additions and subtractions to the accounts, or they could be paper notes that are evidence of credits due. Now, there are certain advantages to using paper notes. It reduces the need for record keeping and enables trading with others who are not members of the association. Now, we did this with Tucson Traders. Tucson Traders started out as a mutual credit clearing circle, and we kept it very simple at the beginning. We simply used a notebook. Each person had their account on one page of the notebook. When you bought something, your account was debited. When you sold something, your account was credited, and the opposite for your trading partner. And at the end of each month, we would just Xerox the notebook pages and send them out to the members as a statement of account. Very quickly, we grew and we decided that it was easier to keep the records on a computer. So somebody wrote up still another LETS accounting software program, and there are many of them, to keep this ledger on the computer. Eventually, the core group said, why are we doing all this work and keeping all these records of accounts? Why don't we just give everybody paper notes that they draw against their account? So we had a big party and everybody came, and we drew out paper notes that we had printed up representing Tucson tokens. So if I drew 100 tokens from my account would be debited for 100, just like when you draw cash out of your checking account. So it reduces the need for record keeping and enables trading with others who are not members. Now let's see what that looks like. Currency issued by and for the association can also circulate outside the association as payment to anybody who's willing to accept it. So we have this circle of traders, mutual credit system, trading among themselves. We've issued them all paper notes that they can use to trade among themselves. But they can also say, Mike, you're not a member of the association, but the association stands ready to redeem this paper in whatever goods and services the members are selling. Can we do business using this as a payment medium instead of using Federal Reserve notes? So, sure, why not? So here's a pictorial representation of that. If we look again at the association, the people within this oval doing business among themselves, and then we consider the members who are outside the circle, the little gray smiley faces. Somebody within the mutual credit association might give paper to somebody outside, and that paper can circulate to others outside, and it can circulate throughout the community, but eventually it's going to come back in because it's the people in the association that stand ready, willing, and able to redeem it. So the foundation for this currency is the goods and services offered by the members of the association. And that would give it strength and credibility, and that's why others outside the association might be willing to accept it as a payment medium. Yes. There may be certain qualifications that we establish for membership, like any association has, and anyone joining would have to adhere to the membership agreement, whatever that happens to be. But we can talk about a circulating currency issued independently of any mutual credit system. So put the mutual credit system aside, and let's think now about a third-party currency that's issued independently of the Federal Reserve and the banking system. These currencies are best issued by offering them as payment to suppliers and employees. That is, they are spent into circulation. They can also be sold into circulation, but we'll get to that. Remember that every currency is a credit instrument or an IOU. So whoever is issuing it, they're putting their IOU out into the community. That means that they have an obligation to accept it back. And they have an obligation to accept it back at par, that is at face value. So who can issue? We said this morning that it can be issued by a business, a mutual municipal government, a mutual association of businesses and governments. To put it another way, any revenue stream may be monetized. A business has a revenue stream coming in from its sales. They can monetize that revenue stream. Likewise, a municipality has a revenue stream coming in when it collects taxes and fees for whatever services it provides. That revenue stream can be monetized. In other words, the business or the municipal government can put its IOUs out into the community on the strength of that revenue coming into it. A currency is ultimately redeemable only for goods and services in the marketplace. So let's look at different community issuers and their basis of issue. As I said, municipalities have anticipated tax revenues and fees for services. Businesses have the capacity to provide goods and services. Associations of businesses and governments can have a cooperative agreement to jointly issue a currency into circulation. That gets a little more complicated, but it's not really hard to solve. So let's look at the spending process. The best way to do this is to issue the currency by putting it in your employees' pay envelopes. You say to your workers, look, we're going to try to bolster the local economy by issuing this supplemental currency into circulation. Would you be willing to accept some small percentage of your pay in community currency? That is, our business, our company IOUs. Secondly, you talk to your suppliers. You say to the suppliers, would you be willing to accept at least part payment in community currency? So to the extent that you can spend the community currency into circulation, you are totally avoiding the use of the national currency. What does this do? It enables us to finance operations with less reliance on official money, which means less reliance on borrowed capital, which means less interest that we have to pay.
Tom, could you tell us where that has happened, and for instance, how you persuaded employees to take part?
In Argentina, the provincial bonds or the provincial currencies that I was talking about earlier were put into the employees' pay envelopes as a partial payment for their salaries. Those notes were then accepted back by the province in payment for provincial taxes and whatever services they charged a fee for.
It does a couple of other things too.
Yes.
It creates demand for what the company actually produces, because it creates the money with which to buy what they produce.
Right.
Plus, the money that they would have paid the employees is still in their bank account. They could use that money to pay the utilities or the taxes if they wanted to.
Let me elaborate on that point, Mike. Thank you. One of the remedies that was suggested for the Great Depression, and this was by one of the German writers that I mentioned earlier, was purchasing certificates. You have employees in a factory, many employees out of work because of the monetary stringency of the Great Depression. The proposal was you pay the workers in purchasing certificates so that you keep them employed. Now they have a spendable medium of exchange that they can use to buy what they need from the businesses in the community, and then those purchasing certificates can be used to buy whatever product the workers were producing in the factory. So it's a way of self-financing the production. So let's consider a municipal government. Here it's paying its employees in part with the municipal currency. The employees and the suppliers. These two groups in turn, well, wait a minute, I'll get to that. Now the municipality has to find a way to get that currency back. It has to redeem it. And the way it redeems it is by accepting it from taxpayers. The employees are also taxpayers. The suppliers are also taxpayers. In between, the way that these get connected is through the local merchants. You have this whole collection of local merchants. You've got employees now with community currency in their pockets. You've got suppliers with community currencies in their pockets. The merchants are willing to accept the community currency because they have taxes to pay. Or they do business with others who have taxes to pay. So we complete the circuit. Whenever you consider a community currency, you have to look at how is the circuit going to be completed. Anyone who issues a currency must receive it back in payment for real value at some point in time. So what are the advantages? The future availability of dollars with which to repay a loan is uncertain. So if you're a company and you borrow money for working capital, you have to find some way to recapture dollars from the marketplace in order to repay the bank what you owe. This is a very speculative proposition because you don't know what the Federal Reserve and the banking system are going to do to the money supply in the interim. And they manipulate the money supply, often to the detriment of small businesses. But credits, whether they're in the form of paper currency notes or ledger account credits, are based on always available goods and services, the stock and trade of the businesses that are issuing the currency. They're always redeemable at par, and this is a very important point. An issue of a currency must always receive its currency back at par. It can't say, well, I put a lot of currency out there and we're having some difficulties, so I'm going to pay you only 50 cents on the, I'm going to give you value only 50 cents on the dollar for my IOUs. That's a, what's the word?
Fraud.
Both apply, yes. So we're freeing ourselves from use of national currency by creating a different payment medium. Credits are locally created and controlled. They remain in the local area so they can promote buy local, that is, stimulate the local economy and strengthen it. And they're accepted throughout the community in payment for all kinds of goods and services, ideally. So getting back to the question I raised this morning, what makes a currency credible and sound? Again, emphasizing the fact that the issuer must agree to receive the currency back in payment at par, that is, face value. Others must be free, on the other hand, to refuse it or accept it only at a discount. So you might say, okay, we've got Greco notes in circulation, but we have doubts about Greco's ability to redeem these notes that are outstanding. He's issued an awful lot of them out there, and his productivity seems to be declining. I'll accept your Greco notes in payment for my goods and services, but only at 80 cents on the dollar. Now this is the self-correcting aspect of a currency, when the market is able to discount it from face value. But the issuer must always accept it at face value. Well, the difference is I've got to clean up my act. If I'm overissuing my currency and I see you're discounting it in the marketplace, you're only accepting it at 80 cents on the dollar, I still have to give you a dollar's worth of goods and services, even though you only paid 80 cents for it. So you can make out as long as I'm able to provide goods and services.
Suppose you're not. Suppose you go under it. What happens to
Well, then you should be paying zero. You should be refusing my currency entirely.
But those that are outstanding, people that have them, what happens to them?
Well, people get stuck with them. They become worthless.
The currency could fail.
That's right. Any currency can fail.
Or the people could continue to trade and ignore it.
Yeah.
They look at it like a bunch of kids playing football, and one kid just doesn't pass the ball. After a while, you don't pass to him, and you get on with the game and go around that person. I mean, the key issue here is the intelligence of the individuals in the community and the opportunity they're looking at. Unfortunately, that's very low.
The point is, though, as Michael pointed out, you're not going to pass the ball to me anymore, which means you're not going to let me play the game. You're not going to let me issue any more into circulation if my currency is already valueless. So there's a limit, you see. You stop letting Greco play the game, but you can continue to use my currency, which is now defunct, as an exchange medium among yourselves. And there are historic examples, many cases of people knowingly accepting counterfeit money because it's a usable medium of exchange. People have gotten used to circulating it. That happened in Argentina. When we were there the first time in 2001, the social money movement was burgeoning. There were 36 different kinds of credito notes, and some of them were totally bogus, worthless. And one of the people that I talked to said, well, I'll accept them anyway, you know, because they help stimulate the economy. They help us to get what we need. But
Doesn't that depend on passing on? If you're passing on a bogus note, you're a counterfeiter yourself if you do that.
well, when people get wise to who the counterfeiters are, then they stop accepting notes from those people. So the source of supply is cut off. You might continue to accept and circulate the ones that are already in circulation, but you're not going to let them circulate anymore.
Have you ever experimented with backing the community currency with dollars for a limited period in order to create confidence?
Yes, this is a widely discussed alternative. It's sort of like putting training wheels on the bicycle. And a good case that I analyze fairly in detail in my book is the Toronto dollar. The Toronto dollar is an example of a currency that is sold for cash, and it is redeemable for cash, however, at a discount. You want the money, you want the currency to circulate. You don't want it to come back in and be redeemed. So how do you make sure that it stays out there in circulation? Well, you put a redemption fee on it so you don't get full value. You might put an expiration date. Well, let me hold that in abeyance. You might say that only certain qualified entities are allowed to redeem it. In the case of Toronto dollars, you put up Canadian dollars in return for Toronto dollars. Then you can go shopping in the St. Lawrence market, the 50 or 60 vendors that are there, and some others around the periphery of Toronto. But you cannot take dollars out of your pocket and redeem them for Canadian dollars. Only the merchants can do that. So these are two ways to keep the currency in circulation. You limit who can redeem it. You put conditions on redemption. But you can always get 100% value from the merchants by spending it for goods and services because it's accepted at par with the Canadian dollar. So there must be no forced circulation, legal tender. Not that the government is going to want to sanction our currency with legal tender status. And the amount issued must be in proper proportion to the anticipated sales volume or tax revenue. So
in national currency.
Yes, if we're using this as a substitute for national currency. But
Well, you have to measure it in something, right? So
right.
Yeah. Now,
You're-
what would the ratio be? You know, is there any kind of
Yes, there is a rule of thumb, and I'll get to that in a minute. In order for you to be able to evaluate the currency, you have to have full and complete information about how much has been issued, and you have to have financial information about the issuer to assess their ability to honor their obligation. So the ultimate answer to your question is going to be answered by the market. On what basis? Well, the market is going to have its own perceptions of the credibility and value of the currency. When the currency begins to pass at a discount, the market is giving you a signal that you need to take corrective action. Now, here's a pictorial representation of that. You start out, the market is accepting your currency at par, and then suddenly it starts to drop off, and you see it passing in the market at maybe 98 cents. So you slow down your issuance to bring it back up to par, and then all of a sudden you put a whole bunch more into circulation, and the market says, oh, that's too much. Now it's passing at 95 cents. So again, you take corrective action. You slow down your issuance process, increase your redemptions, and bring it back to par. So if the issuance is excessive, you'll see your notes trading below par. Your employees and suppliers will say, oh, well, it's trading below par. We're not going to accept this anymore in our pay envelopes. Or if we do, we'll accept it at the market rate, not at par value. So this is forcing you to clean up your act, to reduce your rate of issuance into circulation. If this gets carried too far, people are going to lose confidence in the community currency and in non-national currencies generally. And this is exactly what happened in Argentina a little over a year and a half ago. One of the main Credito currencies was badly abused, widely counterfeited, and as a result, it caused a bubble which eventually burst. And a lot of people got burned holding worthless non-national currencies. Yes?
So excessive issuance would have the same effect as perhaps a drop in productivity.
Yes.
issuing any more at all assumes that productivity is continuing to grow, right?
No, not necessarily. It's that productivity is remaining stable because you have a continuous process of issuance and redemption. The currency is continually coming back to you.
Okay, so you're issuing the same.
You're reissuing it over and over again. It's like you have a stock and a flow. I don't know if my leash is going to allow me to do this, but you've got a bucket. This is currency coming in and currency going out. You're issuing it, or the other way around. This is the community. You're issuing currency into the bucket and you're redeeming it out of the bucket. Now that level is going to fluctuate. If you're issuing it faster than you're redeeming it, you're going to have a buildup in the level, the amount of currency outstanding in circulation. If you're redeeming it faster than you're issuing it, then you're going to bring this level down. And conceivably, you could bring it down to zero when your total issuance is redeemed. Now, we're not wanting to redeem the total issuance. We want to keep the currency in circulation, but we need to look at the possibility of total redemption if it were to be necessary. So, what does that mean? Well, as I said, the currencies are self-correcting when they are accepted at par. If you don't correct it, you'll find it increasingly difficult to spend additional currency into circulation. The adverse effects that you experience as an issuer will cause you to reduce your rate of issuance or suspend issuance until the market discount is eliminated. Now, we don't have strict guidelines, but we do have a rule of thumb. And this again comes from the German School of Monetary Science. The rule of thumb says that you need to have a 1% daily reflux, more or less. What does this mean? It means that your rate of redemption needs to be about 1% of your total issue outstanding every day. So if you have $100,000 worth of currency out there, you need to be redeeming about $1,000 of that each day. Now, of course, you could be replacing that 1,000 with new currency of the same amount. This 1% daily reflux translates into a volume of currency equivalent to about 100 days' sales or revenues, which is about 3 months. 3 months is 90, 92 days, 93 days possibly. So, if you have sales, let's say of $1,000 a day, and we apply this rule of thumb, that means that you could safely issue into circulation about $100,000 worth of your currency. Now, experience is the basis for this rule of thumb, but I'm not sure how much it has been tested recently. So we may decide on the basis of current or future experience that we need to adjust that. Okay, I gave a talk once to a municipal government, and I gave an example, something like this. You have total revenues of $40 million a year. If we apply the 1% daily reflux rule of thumb, that means about $10 million worth of credits could be safely issued into circulation. So on the basis of a revenue stream of $40 million a year, that entity could safely issue about $10 million worth of IOUs into circulation. Any more than that would be problematic. But there are other factors that determine how much can be issued. Remember, we're talking about a localized economy. You have to look at what proportion of the expenditures are made to non-local versus local suppliers. If 80% of your purchases are being done out of state, you're going to be limited as to how much you can put into circulation by way of payments to suppliers, because the non-local suppliers may be reluctant to accept it. They say, well, we don't do any business in your community. We don't buy anything there. We just sell there. Now, let's consider a typical balance sheet. You got assets on the left and liabilities on the right. That's the accounting convention. Now, typically on the liabilities side, whether you're a municipal government or a business, you'll have notes payable, other current liabilities, long-term debt, and equity. Notes payable are debts that are payable in the short term, usually within a year. What we can do, we can show that that short-term debt can be replaced with community currency credits. Now remember, on the notes payable, you're paying interest to somebody for the use of their money. With a local currency, if you spend it into circulation, you're paying no interest to anybody. So you can replace an interest-bearing obligation with a non-interest-bearing obligation and still do the same thing. So the issuance of credits enables retirement of much or all of the short-term debt. The resultant interest savings could be extremely significant, and that money could be used for other purposes. The one municipality that I was talking to had a $3 million 7-year loan at 10% interest. By replacing that loan with a community currency, they could have saved $300,000 a year, or $2.1 million over the term of the loan. Now, as Jane Jacobs points out, economies develop through import substitution. Economies produce more of what they use over time. What they formerly imported is now produced locally, which makes them more self-reliant and self-determined. I had occasion to go to Nicaragua back in 1985. I wanted to see what the Sandinistas were doing. And they were very proud of their rum that they produced there. But they didn't produce bottles. They had to import the bottles from outside. And so this was problematic. In order to import the bottles, they had to earn dollars. And the only way they could earn dollars was by exporting something. And the United States was being rather difficult at that time, and not allowing Nicaragua to trade normally. So there was always a shortage of bottles. Another thing, light bulbs. Light bulbs were at a premium in Nicaragua, and people were always stealing bulbs from one place to put them in another place because they didn't produce light bulbs locally. They had to come from another country. So as a country begins to produce more of those basic necessities for themselves, they gain a measure of independence, which allows them to escape the market dominance of outside players. So the trade continues, but on more equal terms and at a higher level. Let me go back to that. Here's another key aspect of circulating a local currency. Let's suppose the currency begins with a retail establishment. So we're we're here. The retailers in the rectangle, these are the issuers. So they put this currency into circulation by paying their suppliers. Who are the suppliers? Well, typically wholesalers. Retailers buy from wholesalers. So the wholesalers, if they accept the local currency, they're going to want to use it to pay their suppliers. Well, who supplies the wholesalers? It's the manufacturers. And the manufacturers, if they accept the currency, they're going to want to pay their suppliers. And who supplies the manufacturers? Well, the basic commodity producers, the mines, the farms. And the basic commodity producers, well, mainly they're wanting to pay their employees. But notice that you have employees at every level of this economic circuit. So at every level, if we get the employees involved, then we can close the circuit with the currency coming back to the retailers.
But it's really unlikely that all those people will be in the same economy.
It is, but some of them are. So you can take advantage of the ones that are. That's why I said before that there are some limiting factors on how much currency can be put into circulation other than the revenue stream. And these are those factors. So as we pointed out, economies develop through import substitution, producing more of what they use, and more of what they formerly imported is now locally produced, which makes them more self-reliant and self-determined. I got this twice. So the employees are key players. It's human labor that provides the basis for the creation of all economic value. You know, capital is just frozen labor. It's labor from the past that has been embodied in the tools, the equipment, and factories. So acceptance of the currency by employees is key, and we have to find a way to do that. And Michael pointed out a good way of circumventing the laws. By paying employees bonuses, getting them to agree to buy the currency for a bonus paid in national currency. So ultimately we have to find a way to involve the employees in the process as issuing members as well as acceptors, so they can come into the Mutual Credit Association as members. So a community currency, whether it's issued as part of a mutual credit association or separate from it, is a partnership of businesses and workers.
Did you go up the third bullet, employees must be included in credit association issuers, and I understand how the employee would be an issuer.
If we bring them into the Mutual Credit Association, see, in the Mutual Credit Association, we have a group of entities that are trading with one another using credits. Well, the employees are productive as well. They can be part of that association because they're selling labor and they're buying goods and services. So as long as you have something to sell, you can be part of the association. We mentioned earlier, in the case of Toronto dollars, they sell the currency for cash. This can offer important advantages. It can provide financing at low interest or no interest. If you can induce people to buy Toronto dollars for Canadian dollars, you're basically getting a no interest loan. It substitutes a circulating local currency for official currency, promoting buy local. It's sort of like a gift certificate that has many vendors redeeming it. And in chapter 14 of my money book, I offer a taxonomy or a classification scheme for local currencies, and I compare some of them to gift certificates and some to traveler's checks. It can provide a cash pool on which income can be earned. So the Toronto dollars, for example, the Canadian dollars that they get in return for the Toronto dollars can be invested in an account that earns interest or dividends, and that official money income can be used for community development purposes. So you have your cake and eat it too, so to speak. And it can provide a source of funds for charity if a redemption fee is charged. And this is what they do with Toronto dollars. The redemption fee, the money obtained through the redemption fee, is used to help the homeless and for other charitable purposes. How are we doing on time? What time is it? 10 after? Are we out of time? Okay. Well, that's probably a good place to stop. There's more, but you get the idea.
So we should read your book, right?
Read the book, yeah.
You have been listening to a presentation made at the June 2004 conference, Local Currencies in the 21st Century, Understanding Money, Building Local Economies, and Renewing Communities. It was convened by the E.F. Schumacher Society, and for more information you can contact us at E.F. Schumacher Society, 140 Jug End Road, Great Barrington, Massachusetts, 01230, United States of America, or visit us online at www.smallisbeautiful.org.